Welcome to Tales Beyond Midnight. Please kindly subscribe to this channel as we launch into this true life story. Port Harcourt, the restless capital of Rivers State, is a city that never truly sleeps. By day, it is alive with the clamor of commerce, traffic jams, and the pungent smell of crude oil lingering in the humid air. But at night, when the neon lights fade and the streets empty out, a different kind of energy hovers. A mix of superstition, whispered legends, and stories that travel only by word of mouth. It is in this city, somewhere between its bustling suburbs and quiet villages, that one of the strangest horror experiences ever whispered among Nigerians unfolded. This is not a folk tale. It is not Madam Koi Koi, or the Bush Baby, or a fabricated campus ghost story. It is an account that several neighbors, relatives, and church members swore happened. An incident that still raises goosebumps whenever it is told in hushed voices. The story begins with a woman who believed she was happily married. The woman, let's call her Ngozi, her real name is withheld in the original account, was a vibrant woman in her late 20s when she met her husband. He was older, about 40, reserved but charismatic in a quiet way. Friends described him as a man who carried an aura about him, polite, respectful, and deeply affectionate toward Ngozi. They met in Port Harcourt through a mutual acquaintance, and within a year, they married. Their union was not extravagant, just a small registry ceremony, followed by a church blessing. But for Ngozi, it was everything. He was attentive. He rarely raised his voice. He provided for her, and though their finances were modest, she felt secure. When he smiled, she often said, "It was as if the world outside could not touch us." For several years, they lived peacefully in a modest rented flat on the outskirts of Port Harcourt. Neighbors knew them as a quiet couple, not prone to unnecessary quarrels or noise. In fact, many envied their calmness in a city known for chaos. But little did anyone know that behind this serene picture lay a secret too dark to be imagined. It was sometime in the mid-2000s when the incident happened. Ngozi's husband, let's call him Chike, told her they needed to travel to his hometown. His reasons were vague. He mentioned family matters, land issues, and something about his late father's property. Ngozi agreed. She had long wished to meet more of her husband's extended family, but curiously, he always avoided taking her home. That weekend, however, he insisted. The journey from Port Harcourt to his village, believed to be somewhere in Rivers State's interior, was tense but uneventful. Ngozi noticed he was unusually quiet, staring out of the bus window for most of the ride. When she asked if he was worried, he simply squeezed her hand and smiled faintly. By the time they arrived at the village, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the clay houses and dense bush paths. Children ran barefoot across the dusty roads, while elderly men sat under trees, chewing cola and watching newcomers with suspicious eyes. As they approached Chika's family compound, whispers began to spread. Women peered from behind raffia curtains, their eyes wide with disbelief. Some pointed at Chike, muttering. Ngozi didn't understand what was happening. Why did everyone seem so startled at the sight of her husband? When they reached the family compound, the atmosphere changed. Instead of the warm embrace Ngozi had expected, silence fell. Relatives stared in shock, some even trembling. Finally, an elderly uncle stepped forward, his face pale. He looked at Ngozi, then at Chike, then back at Ngozi. "My daughter," he said slowly, his voice shaking. "Who is this man standing beside you?" Confused, Ngozi laughed nervously. "This is my husband, your son, Cheek." The uncle's knees nearly buckled. "Cheek has been dead for 3 years."
Ngozi stood frozen. The laughter she had prepared for introductions died in her throat. She looked at her husband, then at the uncle who had just spoken, waiting for him to take back his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice quivering. "This is Chike. He's here. He's alive. How can you say he is dead?" The uncle shook his head slowly, grief etched into his wrinkled face. Other relatives whispered among themselves. Some crossed themselves. Others spat on the ground, muttering prayers under their breath. A frail woman, later introduced as Cheek's aunt, burst into tears. "My son!" she wailed, pointing at him with trembling fingers. "We buried you with our own hands. How can this be?" Ngozi's head spun. Buried? The man she lived with, cooked for, loved. Buried? She turned to Chike for an explanation. His expression was unreadable. He simply looked at the ground, avoiding her eyes. "Tell them," Ngozi demanded, panic rising in her chest. "Tell them you are alive. Tell them you are here." But Chike remained silent. At that moment, Ngozi felt a chill crawl across her skin. The weight of the villagers' stares pressed on her chest like a stone. She realized something was terribly, terribly wrong. The family reluctantly allowed them into the compound, but the hospitality Ngozi expected was absent. Nobody offered food. Nobody welcomed her. That night, as they lay in the small mud-walled guest room, Ngozi confronted her husband. "Chike, what is going on? They are saying you are dead, that they buried you. Why are they saying such things?" He lay on the raffia mat, his face turned away. After a long silence, he whispered, "Sometimes, the living do not understand the ways of the spirit." Ngozi sat up, her chest tight. "What are you saying? You are alive. You are here with me. We married, we live together. You go to work every day." He turned slowly to face her. His eyes glistened in the dim lamplight, tired, almost sorrowful. "Ngozi, if I told you everything, you would not believe me." A tear rolled down her cheek. "You are scaring me." He reached for her hand, squeezed it gently, and whispered, "Just know that I love you, always." Then he closed his eyes, leaving her in a darkness that seemed thicker than the night itself. The next morning, villagers gathered again, determined to confront the mystery. An elder stepped forward and told Ngozi the story. 3 years earlier, they said, Chike had fallen ill. Despite attempts at treatment, he had died and been buried in the family compound. His grave was still there. They could take her to see it. Ngozi felt faint. Her stomach twisted. This was absurd. She had lived with this man for years. She had touched him, laughed with him, argued with him. He was no ghost. He was flesh and blood. But the villagers insisted. They led her behind the compound to a corner shaded by palm trees. There, she saw a mound of earth, weathered by rain, covered in weeds. A wooden cross stood crookedly at its head. The name carved crudely into it made her knees give way. Cheek, 1970-2002. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She stumbled backward, clutching her chest. No, this is not possible. This is madness," she cried. But the villagers swore it was true. And when she turned to look at her husband, he was gone. Ngozi screamed his name. She ran through the compound, searching frantically. But Chike was nowhere to be found. His bag, his shoes, even his toothbrush, they were gone. It was as though he had never come with her. Panic surged through her veins. She demanded answers from the villagers, but they only shook their heads. Some told her to leave the compound immediately, fearing she had been living with an ogbanje, a spirit that returns to torment the living. Shaking, broken, Ngozi fled back to Port Harcourt. Days later, after locking herself in her flat and refusing visitors, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, there was no one there. Only a folded piece of paper lay on the floor. Her hands trembling, she picked it up. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakably Cheek's. "My dearest Ngozi, forgive me for the pain you will feel. I love you more than words can carry, but I do not belong here anymore. I should have left long ago, but my heart was not ready to leave you. I wanted to give you happiness, even if only for a while. Now the time has come. Do not look for me. Do not ask questions. Simply live your life. And know that, wherever I am, my love for you remains eternal." Chike tears blurred the words. She clutched the letter to her chest and wailed until her neighbors gathered at her door. But when they entered, the letter was gone. Word spread quickly in Port Harcourt. Neighbors whispered that Ngozi had been living with a ghost. Some mocked her. Others feared her. Her church pastor visited, praying fervently and sprinkling holy water in her home. But the nights brought no peace. She heard footsteps in the corridor when she was alone. She felt the weight of someone lying beside her in bed. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, She swore she heard his voice whisper her name. Ngozi. Her health declined. She grew thin, restless, paranoid. Her relatives urged her to relocate, but wherever she went, the memories followed. In Nigerian culture, stories like this are often explained through spiritual frameworks. Some believed she had been deceived by an ogbanje or mami wata spirit that took human form. Others insisted it was jazz, voodoo, that a spirit was conjured to live with her temporarily. A few said it was proof that the dead sometimes walk among the living, fulfilling unfinished desires. But the most chilling explanation came from a traditionalist. Sometimes the dead borrow time. They live again, not forever, only until they have said goodbye. When that time ends, they vanish. That is what happened to your husband. Years later, Ngozi never remarried. She told her story rarely, usually only when pressed. Each time her eyes would glaze over with unshed tears. She never saw Cheek again, but she never stopped hearing him. And to this day, in the back streets of Port Harcourt, her story is whispered in low tones, as a warning, as a mystery, as one of the most chilling real-life horror experiences of Nigeria. Please kindly like, comment, and subscribe. What do you think of this story?